that several commissioners kept on talking about independence, that you're independent. You guys, are you getting criticized already that you're not independent, or what prompted those discussions?
I have not gotten any criticisms in that regard. Clarity is important, and that's one of the things we want to do is be transparent with the charge that they're given.
The public's going to want to know where do you think you're headed in terms of how much you're going to raise salaries?
That's a good question, and that's why we're doing the reviews. That's why we're attempting to get the data from surrounding states. There are no precluded anythings at all. Right now, we're just trying to ascertain this information to be able to make a decision. And there may not be a decision. We may say that things are well, but I think you can't do that until you have the review of our economic status in the states, as well as the surrounding states with what other General Assemblies have been doing. So we are independent, but we have to get information. We're not going to make any kind of decision on any kind of data that's not supported.
Could you just clarify, I know that in your bio you're listed as a business. What kind of business do you operate?
I could turn the question around, Michael, but since I know you, I have a small LLC called Ross Consulting Service.
Right.
And I consult with those who would need my services, which I have done since 2011. But the question I would have, what relevance does that have with me being a citizen of the United States and Arkansas?
You previously were a registered lobbyist.
Yes.
And so I'm just wondering, are you consulting for the very entities that you represented as lobbyists?
No.
Okay.
Unless the Church of Christ USA is here in the state.
Okay.
Okay.
You understand where the relevant question?
I trust you, Michael.
Do you have any concerns about the timeline that y'all face, even if it's just an initial review, just that February 2nd deadline, being able to get even just an initial review done in that time?
It's going to be challenging, but I think that we have staff in place and people in place for us to ascertain that information. We're going to give it our best effort.
Based on the comments I was hearing from me, it sounds like the initial review is not going to include recommended adjustments, or it's just going to be just a look at the salary.
We'll have to take it in steps. We know that there's a timeline, and we will adhere to the constitutional amendment. I guess it's what, Amendment 94, is it?
Right, that's correct. Right.
So what advantages do you see for the state in doing setting salaries this way with citizens?
Well, I don't think I'm qualified to say that right now. I think once we ascertain the information, we can see if we're competitive. Full-time jobs are full-time jobs. And so we'll just have to see what the data has to say. And recommendations from the other commissioners, that we have an excellent group of commissioners, varied in sundry backgrounds, interests. Some own businesses, some are business retired folks, some are government folk. But the fact, though, that we're going to do it for the people of Arkansas, as the Constitution requested.
One of the guidelines that they mentioned was you have to look at the economic condition of the state of Arkansas.
Yes, sir.
How do you weigh that as comparing it to the salaries of other states maybe? Why is that important to you?
Well, I think, first of all, everything is relative. CPI, you name it, everything is relative. And we want to treat all of the constitutional offices fairly. I use an old adage. Michael said that he didn't know I was in this business, but I'm also an ordained minister and retired. But by the same token, I kind of use Matthew 7 and 12. As unto others as you would have them to do it to you, do also to them. So therefore, we're going to try to be equitable in our decisions, but we have no pre-concluded ideas about it.
I guess to put it more bluntly, do you think the relative poverty of Arkansas should be reflected by the legislature?
I can't answer that question for you. I'm just going to go with the charge that this amendment has asked us to do. We'll gather the data, and then we'll see where the data leads us.
For those watching tonight, why should they care that there is a panel of citizens selecting these salaries?
Those watching tonight? I'm not being facetious. What do you mean?
any average citizen who would read this interview or watch this interview, why, in your opinion, should they care that this is going on?
Well, I think good government is good anyway, and I think that responsibility is important. I think that getting good people in government and keeping good people in government is important. And therefore, as a citizen of the state, I would hope that if I were not a part of it, I would hope that there would be people who are concerned about things that would be not only relative, but to be the kind of government we would want to be proud of.
And specifically to the salaries is kind of what I'm questioning.
Let's wait and see what the data tells us.
Just to clarify, the initial review process, you're saying you are just going to examine the salaries during that process and not recommend any adjustments until after that time period?
Yeah, the amendment calls for us to review the salaries. And I think you guys would also agree that you can't make a decision until you review something, until you weigh all of the factors, and so that's the primary charge.
I think what he was getting at was, I mean, you guys haven't precluded by February 2nd raising salaries.
Heavens no.
Okay.
Heavens no. We have to see what the data says.
Right.
I don't think the amendment called for us to do anything except to review initially.
Right.
And then, if there are recommendations, to make recommendations that we would think that would be equitable to the citizens of Arkansas.
So you may or may not. You may or may not. It could be either way.
I don't think that we may or may not.
Okay.
I mean, we may have to. My thing is, the data is important. I don't make decisions unless I have truly looked thoroughly at information, and I think that that's what the citizens would want us to do. Review the information as the amendment calls for, and then make our recommendations.
Would you possibly make recommendations by February 2nd, or determine just to do the review by February 2nd?
Well, we're going to do what the law calls for, and the recommendation may be nothing. But we can't make that decision until such time that we review the information. And if it calls for it being by February 2nd, then we're going to do everything possible to meet that requirement. You know. Some things I set goals, and sometimes I have to delay them. But we'll see what happens. Live one day at a time.